This is TWIS. This Week in Science episode number 745, recorded on Wednesday, October 30th, 2019. Who needs a microbiome anyway? Hey there, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on This Week in Science, we will fill your head with brains, monkeys, and bacteria. But first,
TWIS is supported by listeners like you. We thank you for your support. We really couldn't do it without you.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. There are creatures living in the darkness. Despite any evidence to the contrary, you are most likely a human. What it means to be human is a question with many possible answers. Could be our thoughts, desires, and feelings. Could be our intellect, ethics, and accomplishments. Our anatomy can be considered distinctly human, and our DNA as well. But there is something else, something distinctly not human, living in the darkness inside every one of us. The bacteria in our guts. And these living creatures have much more to do with all of the things we think of as strictly human than we realized until recent years. But far from being body snatchers, they help us be humans. In fact, bacteria are so essential to a healthy human life that without them, we couldn't have This Week in Science coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. This week in science. What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? This week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
and a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again on our spooky Twissoween show. Well, yeah, well, it's not quite Halloween. That's tomorrow night as we are sitting here on the 30th of October, 2019, recording the show.
There are some time zones where it's Halloween already.
That's true. All right. Thank you for that reminder. We are on a oblate spheroid body that is rotating in space. Yep.
Yeah.
There we go. And what did I want to talk about? Oh, yeah. We have all sorts of science stories for you tonight. We bring the science, and we have got a lot of it. I have brains, because who doesn't want brains? And I also have a scary story of artificial intelligence taking over something. Kind of. And we also have an interview coming up about microbiomes and not having one. What? Yeah. Justin, what did you bring?
I have got antibacterial microbiota and better, faster, stronger robots.
Better, faster, stronger. There we go. And Blair, the animal corner, please.
Oh my goodness, it's a very spooky animal corner. I have rat-eating monkeys.
Yeah.
I have a six-fingered harbinger of death. I have rats with road rage and spider copulatory organs.
That's
double, toil and trouble, fire burn, cauldron bubble, spider copulatory organs, and eye of newt. You know, it's one of those things.
Yeah, just like
And
that.
I can't wait to find out if it's rats that are eating monkeys or monkeys that are eating the rats, because the way you said that could be either way.
You'll have to wait.
Let your imagination run until then. As we jump in the show, I want to remind you that if you have not yet subscribed to TWIS, you can do so by looking for us all places podcasts are found. Look for This Week in Science. You can also search for us on YouTube, on Facebook, or you can visit our website, TWIS.org, twis.org. Twis.org is also where you can find a link to purchase our 2020 TWIS Blair's Animal Corner calendar. They are available for pre-order now. We're going to be ordering them and sending them to you soon, but we need you to order. So if you need a calendar for 2020, get on it. Go to our website. And the final little tiny bit of business, we are on YouTube right now, and there's this thing going on, hashtag Team Trees. Has anyone heard of Team Trees?
Mm-mm.
No, you haven't heard of Team Trees?
No.
There is a YouTuber named Mr. Beast YT who started a big effort to plant 20 million trees before the end of the year. And so right now, if you look for Team Trees, go to look for hashtag Team Trees. You can find links to go and donate to the Arbor Foundation. Every dollar plants a tree. And right now we have lots of people we are over 10 million trees already, and it's only been going for about a week. It's very exciting.
Cool.
Yeah, so let's be part of trying to plant trees. I mean, it's not going to fix climate change, but it is a big step in moving in the right direction and showing us all, if we work together, we can do some really amazing things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hashtag Team Trees. Ah! So let's move in to the rest of the show. Are you ready for our interview? Yes. I would love to introduce our guest tonight. Dr. Tobin Hammer is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Texas at Austin and describes himself as a combination ecologist, evolutionary biologist, entomologist, microbiologist, and naturalist. Just pick one.
Lots of hats.
Very many hats. His work centers on the study of the interactions between insects, currently bees, butterflies, moths, and their microbes. Thank you for joining us on the show tonight, Tobin.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, chat about microbiomes and bugs.
Yes. All right. So you've said it out loud. In the disclaimer, Justin was disclaiming about the human microbiome, and we talk about the microbiome and what we're discovering as its absolute importance in human functioning. I mean, this week alone, there's a study that said that if you go outside and get UV and vitamin D, that it will benefit your microbiome in your gut. If you get sleep, it benefits the microbiome in your gut. There's all this news. Why did you go for microbiome of bugs?
Honestly, I'm much more interested in insects than humans. No offense to humans, but insects are just so much more fascinating. There's such a huge diversity of lifestyles and behaviors and appearances. And so I've just been really interested in insects for a long time. And of course, they're also really important to humans. So there's a lot of interest in controlling disease and agricultural pests and supporting pollinators and so forth. So there is, understandably, a lot of research into understanding how insects work. And so I came at insects from more of a microbiology background. And so that was kind of a natural question to start looking at how insects interact with microbes. And of course, people have been doing that for many years for certain groups of insects, but some groups have been much better studied than others. And I kind of launched into the butterflies and moths, which have been really well studied for other aspects of their biology, but hadn't been that much work on their microbiomes. And now I kind of have a better sense of why that is, but I wasn't really aware of that from the onset.
Butterflies, moths, they go through metamorphosis. This is something that I have wondered forever. What if they have a microbiome as caterpillars?
Mm-hmm.
What happens to that microbiome?
Yeah.
When they're in a soup in the
Yeah.
cocoon. Yeah.
What happens?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And that was actually my first project in grad school, was looking at how the microbiomes shift from the larval stage to the chrysalis when it's undergoing metamorphosis, when the adult emerges. Because, as you mentioned, butterflies are famous for doing this, and they completely change. And, in a nutshell, we found that the composition of their microbes changes too. And maybe it's not super surprising, as a caterpillar, they're eating leaves. As an adult butterfly, they're, visiting flowers and drinking nectar. And the structure of their gut completely changes. They make a whole new gut. And so from like a microbe's perspective, it's like a completely different species of animal, even though it is the same individual as a larva and an adult. So that was kind of a clue that there was something really different going on between the caterpillars and the adults, at least in terms of what types of microbes are in there. There are a lot of other examples of that from beetles and flies and other insects that undergo metamorphosis.
So how does that transition take place? Because I was thinking of part of what a microbiota does is it allows you to better digest the food that you're taking in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're switching foods along the way here too, do you have to go and get this? Is it on the plant that they're getting it, or is it where does this come from?
Yeah, so that's a really major question in microbiome research. Where do the microbes come from? What do they do? How does that potentially change across development of the animal, like from a larval stage to an adult stage? In the case of caterpillars, what I found was that they actually don't have a role in digestion, which is surprising coming at it from a human perspective, or cows or lots of other animals where that's like a critical function that we think of. And that is certainly true, but it doesn't necessarily apply to all animals. But even within a butterfly, say, a caterpillar may not need microbes for digestion, but the adult might, because it's eating very different things. These particular butterflies that I worked on also feed on pollen, which is, a kind of a tough food to break down. And so that's one of the things I'm working on now, is whether the butterflies use microbes to help digest pollen. But as far as where they're coming from, in the caterpillars, what's in the gut generally seems to be what they're eating. And that's actually very different from humans again. I use humans as kind of a reference point because that's what's really best studied now. There's been so much work on human microbiomes. And in humans, we have really specific microbes that are kind of native to the human gut habitat. And they do kind of move around between people, and they're temporarily can be in the environment and stuff, but they're not generally coming in from food. And so it's a very different scenario as with like a caterpillar.
That's really interesting. Yeah, so I guess there is then a diversity of whether it's function or, for digestion, or if it's doing something else, or if it's just found a niche there. There was a group of microbes that were found to be in bamboo eaters. A bamboo eating lemur, a panda, the red panda, which isn't related to the giant panda. And it was also happened to be one of these microbes was commonly found or had previously been found only in termites, which would make you think this was a very specific digestion thing, but it could be something that's already on plants from what you're saying, and they just all happen to be getting it. Yeah,
and totally, and that's so it's really easy within this like microbiome science to identify a particular species of bacterium and say, hey, that's related to this other bacterium that's been found in this other animal. And in that other animal, it does X, Y, and Z. Well, since it's, closely related, it probably does X, Y, and Z in this animal too. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And in the example you mentioned, it may have this, the bacteria are maybe on bamboo generally, and they're just kind of passing through all of these bamboo eaters. And that's very different from contributing to digestion of bamboo. And pandas are really interesting because they're this weird herbivorous bear.
Yes.
And they have a bear-like, carnivore-like gut, very different from a typical ruminant gut, for example. And they have a lot of traits in common with caterpillars, actually. They're kind of, I like to think of them as like big furry caterpillars. And I think that there's some kind of tentative evidence that extends to their microbiome, how their microbiomes work too.
Oh my God. Pandas, just big furry caterpillars.
Well, there are caterpillars called woolly bears.
It's
so
true.
It's not that far of a jump, right?
Yeah. I mean, so like a really kind of noteworthy thing about caterpillar gut is that they have really short and really broad guts, and the food passes through really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all of those traits are also the case for pandas. And so if the food is passing through, they're kind of getting a little bit of nutrients out of it, but they're not really efficiently breaking down all of the fiber that's in there. Okay, so this is a picture of a caterpillar that I dissected. And I'll just walk through it really quickly. So this is like showing the back of the caterpillar kind of opened up lengthwise. And that big sausage thing in the middle, that's the midgut, that big green tube.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a little bit of hindgut, which is the colon of the caterpillar.
Oops.
And so food just kind of passes through in a few hours, and they're essentially like just these big simple tubes that are just kind of like funneling leaves, mulched leaves through, and then they just defecate it out. So frass is entomology jargon for poop. And so this is a photo that was taken from a collaborator of mine who runs this caterpillar environmental outreach organization called the Caterpillar Lab. He's also a professional photographer, and he made this series of caterpillar frass photos. And this is kind of like, and here's another frass photo that I took from a tomato hornworm. And it's really interesting that you break open these fecal pellets and you see like just mulched leaf material. You can sometimes see individual bites of the leaf fragments that the caterpillar like swallowed and then just crapped out the other end. So like here you can see that really well. So they're not
digesting them very well.
Yeah,
Not completely.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's still tons of energy and nutrients in this material. And you could think of it like they're wasting that, but it's, from their perspective, a more efficient strategy to get a little bit of the easy nutrients out quickly, and then not bother with all the hard stuff, and then just take another bite of food. It's kind of like if you think of yourself as like a small caterpillar on a big plant, you're at an all-you-can-eat buffet, salad buffet. So you're not limited by food availability. You're just like trying to get as much through your system to grow and get to the adult stage as fast as you can. So it's just kind of part of their lifestyle.
And since they do have that just the availability of food, they haven't necessarily had to evolve the symbioses that have evolved for like cows or other ruminants. That they really, maybe they don't have all the grass that they need, or they have like cows and deer, they have these large body sizes that they have to give so much energy to. So it's a different equation.
And it's temporary. It's why you don't do a ton of dental work or put braces on kids' baby teeth. They're going away. It's going to go away. Let's not invest too much in this. So does it become then later more of an investment and more worth having that more complex
in the adult butterfly or moth? Yeah, so that's like a totally open question. There's like maybe 3 or 4 people who are studying adult butterfly or moth microbiomes. It's kind of a niche subject at the moment. A lot of species of moths don't even feed. They don't even have guts or mouth parts. It's just, they basically, they get all the energy and nutrients they need as a caterpillar. They store that up, and then they live for, a week or two. Yeah. Really short period of time. They mate, they fly around, they lay eggs, and then they're done. And so they don't really they don't need to like eat more food.
That sounds awful. I feel like they just get hungrier. It's like, what is this feeling? I've got this really terrible feeling in I don't even have a thing to have it in.
They don't even, it would be very frustrating not to even have a mouth to eat if you're very hungry. But it's hard to, who knows what they're thinking.
Well, but yes. Would they be hungry if they don't have a proper gut?
Or is it just getting more and more tired and then you're dead?
Yeah, I think just tired.
Yeah, because they just run out of steam. They run out of energy that they accumulated as a caterpillar. But once they lay all their eggs, then nothing else left to do.
Their job is done.
As a female anyway. Yeah. So for those, there may really not be any microbial contribution to their biology in any part of their life cycle. Of course, I'm just speculating. And that's kind of an aspect of all of this is, it's hard to disprove the existence of some important microbe that might be at some part of their life stage doing some important critical thing that's kind of hard to see. So I try to be a little bit tentative, but I would put money on that personally.
Yeah. How have the ideas about all of this started to change or changed over, the decades of, okay, once upon a time, you could only see the bacteria that you could culture in a dish to be able to identify them. Now we've got genetic sequencing. And so we can go, hey, we can identify these various species. How does it change our perspective on what is potentially there?
Oh, yeah, it's totally for better and a little bit for worse, I think. It's totally changed. So back in the day when we were just looking at symbionts, meaning microbes associated with a host like a plant or animal tissue, people really studied and noticed the like majorly interesting associations where you see obvious bacteria in a particular region of the gut or inside of animal cells that are really abundant, especially when hosts grow new organs to host symbionts, which sometimes happens. That's a really obvious anatomical feature that you'll notice if you just like pull the gut out of some beetle or whatever.
Oh, look, there's an appendix or
right, exactly. Yeah. So there had been a lot of work done on these really kind of intricate symbioses where the hosts are super investing in creating a new niche for these microbes, and in return the microbes provide important services. And so, that's like common, especially among insects, but it's not universal. But once we kind of had DNA sequencing tools readily available, you can sequence microbes anywhere, like any surface, any drop of liquid or hair or whatever you want, you can sequence it. And on the plus side is that really opens up the like animal world and plant world that we can explore. But the downside is it's hard to know what that means if you detect 20 species of bacteria from a swab of, some animal part. Are those bacteria living? Are they associated with the tissue? Are they specific? Those are questions that are much easier to get at if you're actually seeing the interaction with your own eyes under a microscope. And then there's lots of like technical things, like a lot of these sequencing studies, it's easy to get contamination. So one little anecdote there is that there had been a lot of interest in studying potentially vertically transmitted bacteria in humans, meaning directly from the mom to the baby.
Child.
In utero. And so some folks had been sequencing placentas and finding that, hey, there's all these bacteria in there that no one has reported, even though lots of people have been studying the placenta for a long time. So maybe there's this diversity of bacteria that are actually transmitted in utero to the developing fetus and then go on to seed the gut. But it turns out that all those bacteria were contaminants of the lab protocol.
Because I remember when that study came out and I brought it up on the show, but I hadn't seen the retraction or the update that it was all contamination. But that was, I remember, one big question.
Yeah, totally. And I suspect that has played out in kind of smaller ways beyond like the human placenta in various animals and stuff. So there may be lots of cases where you can get a bunch of sequences of bacteria, but there may not have been anything there. And you would only have known that if you use other methods or if you actually just look at the tissue or the gut or whatever.
Right. But so we've, as a scientific community, we've been just of this opinion that everything has a microbiome then, and now we're maybe starting to look a little bit at a little different perspective.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I am. I'm not sure
you
how.
Are.
Well,
I was going to say, when I was looking through your papers and various commentary, there was a Scientific American article by Erin Ross from a while back, and within her reporting, she said that there have been a few researchers finding basically this null result for microbiomes and having a hard time even getting their research published.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, yeah. And I was kind of surprised that I was able to get the caterpillar paper published, because I had heard a lot of anecdotes from people who had, I sequenced all these fish, or I sequenced all these stick insects, and we got a bunch of kind of crap data. It doesn't look like there's anything there, but we tried publishing it, and the reviewers didn't go for it. And so there's a lot of kind of file drawer data sets like that, and then people keep repeating the same animals over and over again, and no one knows. And then, but yeah, that brings up the kind of the point about, it's essentially a negative result, and you can't really, philosophically speaking, you can't prove that there's no microbiome, or that there's no, beneficial effect of microbes for an animal. You can't, prove it beyond the shadow of a doubt. And so,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. But I've always wanted to have a null result journal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That people could just look up and see a study was done.
Yeah.
They didn't find anything.
Right.
Actually, three studies were done. None of them found anything. And then, people can stop looking.
Yeah. Exactly. I think there is a journal of negative results. Oh, I heard about it. And I'm not sure if that's real or if that's just like some wishful thinking, but that would be really useful, because I've definitely heard of a lot of anecdotes of similar things. One hope is that the more examples of this there are, the easier it'll be for other people to publish it, because it's like, oh, this is just like caterpillars, or oh, this is just like in these stick insects, or whatever. It's not like a totally out of this world possibility that an animal might not have or need a microbiome. And so maybe more examples will come out of the woodwork down the road.
And so there's in humans, which I think of as I like, it's self-centered, but I like to think of humans as being very complicated creatures with big brains. Mm-hmm. And yet we're finding that the human microbiome can affect human thinking, human behavior to some degree. And I've heard that this takes place also in the insect world, but if there's insects without a microbiome, or without a steady one, how can that be? Or can there be enough of differentiation that it can just be both?
Well, so it's certainly not like that. Their behavior relies on having microbes around. Like certain behaviors can be modified by microbes. There's some examples of like parasites manipulating insect behavior into doing their bidding. Mm-hmm. And there are, other kind of subtle examples in insects, but, I don't think they're like core behavioral programs that need microbes to operate. But I'm not sure if I totally got all of your question.
Well, there was somebody we had talked to years ago who had done some microbiome swapping on insects and got them to go after different pest insects, and got them to go after different food sources. As a result, they would switch their food source based on that change in microbiome.
Yeah, so there can be some interesting effects on like the odors produced by an insect, depending on the diet and how the diet affects the microbiome. And then the odors, of course, are going to be perceived by insects in a lot of ways relevant to mating and attraction of parasites and all sorts of other things. So there can be kind of these complex diet, microbiome, behavior feedbacks like that are going on. And those are probably much more widespread than we realize. A lot of microbes also use insects to get around. So like a lot of the yeasts will get from like that are, say, fermenting rotting fruit. They'll get from patch of fruit to patch of fruit or other like rotting substrates by hitchhiking with insects. So if they can attract a bug to eat them or pick them up and then carry them to a new spot, they can have first dibs on colonizing that patch.
All higher life forms are just public transit.
This is what I always say. We are a city bus for microbiome.
Right. Yeah. Right.
There's with the idea that our bodies, or animal bodies, are built to resist infection, to fight off parasites, to fight off these things. How does that play into this idea of maybe a I guess, a nice bell curve of distribution for no microbiome to microbiome. At what point does it, does it transition from being, I'm just going to keep everything out to,
Right.
hey, you're my friend now?
Yeah. Oh, that's like a really interesting kind of topic and something that I want to work on in the future. The first step will be like actually getting that bell curve, knowing where different animals fall in that distribution. And then we can say, what is it about animals, certain animals that leads them to be on what end of the distribution? But I think you're saying about like immune defense.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is like one risk of having a microbiome, is that you still need to defend yourself from really virulent bacteria and other microbes that can cause disease. But you have to support these beneficial microbes. So it's this kind of delicate balance where you have to keep your good bacteria healthy, but also ward off disease. And the good bacteria can help in warding off the disease, but it's all, like there's a lot of complex kind of interplay there. And at least from the caterpillar point of view, I think that they've gotten this strategy where instead of relying on beneficial microbes to help combat disease, they just go with the strategy of not letting any microbes grow at all. And so there are some advantages to that, in that you don't have to, sometimes even the beneficial bacteria can turn pathogenic under certain contexts. And also if you just create this niche, either in terms of nutrients or like I mentioned, sometimes there's organs like kind of an appendix thing or pouches or what have you that can help to host these beneficial microbes. Well, those can more easily be invaded by foodborne pathogens, say. And for caterpillars, they eat so much food. I was saying how, they're like, that's their strategy, is to eat as much as they can. That's really exposing them to a lot of potential foodborne pathogens.
Right.
So like that salad bar analogy, you're much more likely to get E. coli infection if you eat the entire salad bar. And that's kind of what caterpillars are doing. So it may be something about the like foodborne pathogen pressure and the costs and benefits of having or not having gut microbes.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect, I think.
Yeah. What have you been looking at? I know. So we've talked a little bit about the caterpillars that they don't seem to have a microbiome. You've got the adult butterflies that are potentially eating pollen and having a few microbes seems to help with that, but not having a massive microbiome versus other butterflies that maybe exist off of nectar. And so they're like, it's just sugar. Who needs the bugs? And then you've also got the bees that you're working with. How are you seeing like these differences in basically the gut ecology play out for these different animals?
Yeah. So they're all totally different. And, of course, the caterpillars and butterflies being the same species or individual, but from a microbe's point of view, different animals, essentially. Bees being completely different insects, but compared to those butterflies, they're feeding on essentially the same food of nectar and pollen. But yeah, there are, really the gut microbiome of bees, for honeybees and bumblebees at least, it's a totally different ball game. So they have really, it's actually kind of analogous to the human gut microbiome. They have a really high density of very specific bacteria that are involved in digestion and also protect from disease. They're located in basically the same spot. They're transmitted socially as they are in humans. There's a lot of interesting parallels there, just as an aside. But it's interesting that they feed on pollen and nectar, as do almost all bees. But it's really the social bees, like bumblebees and honeybees, that have these really tight associations with these highly specific bacteria. And the thinking is that the sociality within these colonies allows them to evolve really specific bacteria because they can be transmitted from one generation to the next and stick around within an animal lineage. So it's not just the diet or the life stage, but also whether a given animal is social, how social is it? That's another kind of factor affecting what kind of microbiome an animal will have.
When you're looking at these various microbiomes, I'm just thinking about bees, and I know there are, and I guess I'm thinking specifically of like honeybees, where they're making, people think, honey is antimicrobial to a certain extent. How does that play into the whole microbiome? Do you know if how that works?
So they're not so they have these very specific bacterial symbionts. They're not getting them from nectar or honey. And honey is actually a really difficult place to grow as a microbe. That's why you can have it out on your shelf for years and nothing happens, because there's too much sugar. Right. But the bacteria are all transmitted, basically from frass or feces within the hive to new bees that are emerging within the same hive. And some of the bacteria definitely rely on nutrients present in nectar, or honey, if that's what they're ingesting within the hive. But they're not transmitted via the honey. And the same goes for pollen. I know that there might, there's a lot of interest in like taking bee supplements and probiotics and stuff. And there's a lot of mysteries surrounding
royal jelly for everyone.
Whenever I tell anyone that I work on microbiomes, the immediate next question is about probiotics and whether they should take them and what kinds and that kind of thing. So I try to avoid it, but it's inevitable.
Yeah, and if you eat too much of the royal jelly, I think you start to transform into a queen bee. I think that you should be careful
of your microbiome.
If you have too much. If you have too much.
Yeah, or if you're a fan of Futurama, you might assume that you'd start hallucinating or go to sleep forever. It's also part of the lore now.
I have never hallucinated from honey, royal jelly, but anyway.
You just haven't had enough.
I obviously have not had enough. Jeez. It's all that sugar, all that stuff. What do you wish that that people are asking you these questions, but as somebody who works on microbiomes and specifically these insects, what do you wish people understood about how how insects interact with the environment and their microbiome?
That's a really, really good question. I think it's mainly the diversity. I think even within among a lot of biologists, we don't often appreciate how diverse insects are in so many ways. So even within bees, because I work on bees now, so I'm always kind of harping on the difference between honeybees and all of the 20,000 wild bees that are out there. So there's this huge diversity of bees that are kind of get swept under the rug when we just think about honeybees. And so that applies to all sorts of things about their biology, but also their microbes. And so I think we often generalize, this is my microbiome soapbox, from like humans to all mammals, or from say termites to all insects or what have you. But there's so much diversity out there, and there could be really important, but maybe subtle differences even among different species because of what they eat or whether they're social or whatnot. And so I think that's kind of like a big challenge, is to kind of understand the species specific interactions with microbes. And, it's really important for like all of these insects are declining, including a lot of pollinators. And so we really need to understand their specific biology and whether there's any kind of relationship with microbes. We know that in honeybees, their gut microbes are sensitive to certain chemicals in the environment, like the herbicide glyphosate. Yeah. So whether that applies to other bees, who knows, but yeah.
I think, we look at nature and we think it's just, it looks pretty, but it's just there.
Yeah, it's changing. It's changing very quickly. So
it's changing very rapidly. And I mean, from the, once again, very human centric perspective, we look at stuff and it's like, oh, antibiotic resistance, and we shouldn't be spreading antibiotics around. What kind of effect are they going to have on the environment? And you think of it all in terms of just humans or the animals that we eat. And but it's interesting to think that there could potentially be varying degrees of effects on ecosystems as a result of the varying amount that different animals depend on them.
Right. Yeah, totally. And then, it makes it makes everything more complicated and difficult to extrapolate. So maybe that's why we don't do it so much. But I think that it's really important.
Do you ever feel bad for nutritionists? Over like people who wrote books on nutrition 20 years ago, 10 years ago.
They do seem to have a tough job. And my reading is that it's always changing their recommendations and like the latest science. And also the kind of the realization that the human gut microbiome, this being this kind of forgotten organ that's critical to our nutrition, that's definitely changing. I mean, it should change how we see our nutrition, because we do have to feed our gut microbes in addition to just ourselves. So, I mean, it seems like it would be an exciting time to be a nutritionist, at least if you're working on gut microbiome stuff.
Right, but if you're trying to sell books, then you'd have to say, this is the plan for if you have this particular subset of bacteria in your stomach. So go get your poop check and then decide if this book is right for you.
Right. Yeah, very highly personalized recommendations.
Very personalized. But then the follow up to that is there a possibility with the field that you're following within the insect community microbiome that we could get a proper microbiota nutritionist book out for pollinators? That would encourage farmers to somehow seed fields with the right probiotic for the insect.
Well, I really like that idea. I mean, certainly it's hard enough getting the right kind of flowering plants to be available, much less any kind of probiotic bacteria. And of course, if you think about spraying, bacteria out in the field, that's going to be all sorts of regulations and complications there. It seems hard enough to even just get the right, flowers that we know bees like and do well on. That's kind of the first challenge, I suppose. Probiotics are the next level.
Right, but maybe it's not. It's the prebiotic.
The prebiotic thing.
The prebiotic. So it's not the actual bacteria that you're spraying on the field, but it is the environment, making the environment suitable for the right kinds of bacteria. Yeah, and that could totally be happening.
We're just kind of getting a glimpse into that. So one example is that there's this new, really exciting work being done showing that sunflower pollen in particular makes bumblebees much more resistant to this particular parasite that's all over the US and infecting lots of different bumblebees and stuff. And so one idea is that the sunflower pollen in particular is a prebiotic that supports their bumblebees' beneficial gut bacteria that then protect the bee from the parasite.
Right.
So that's this is all currently being done right now. But that's one example of, where it could lead in the future for sure.
I love it. Sunflower pollen for the bumblebees. We get other flowers for the honeybees, and then the 20,000 other wild bees.
Right.
They each get their own specialized nutritionist.
Right. Although I am not totally certain that all of those other bees have much of a gut microbiome, but the jury is still out there. But I will.
And I'd be curious to see if they were that different, if they're pollinating similar things. Because isn't the honeybee sort of a hybrid? I mean, it's a result of animal husbandry at this point. The bee that we have is the honeybee that we use in agriculture. It's an import. It's out of its natural environment.
Right.
It's sort of a hybrid. So it maybe part of the reason it would be so different than the wild bee.
Yeah, it's certainly like, the cow of the bee world. It's like livestock. Exactly. At least in the US here, where it is non-native, it's imported. And yeah, we've been managing for so long. We've been doing all sorts of things that probably affect their honeybee gut microbes, like antibiotic treatment, for example, has been a pretty common practice. Just like spray tetracycline on your hives to treat particular bacterial pathogens. So of course, there is evidence now that has resulted in antibiotic resistance genes popping up in their gut bacteria. So there's clearly effects on the gut bacteria, and whether other things that we expose honeybees to, like I mentioned, the herbicide glyphosate, or which is part of Roundup. There's probably lots of similar things like that. Yeah.
You described it as the cow of the bee world, but but I've heard it described as more like a poodle versus a wolf in terms of robustness, and ability to survive on its own. So,
maybe more like a Dalmatian. I don't know.
We've
really like a bulldog, because they've been to the point where they can't do their job anymore.
So we've sort of in a way maybe hindered some of their natural ability to survive in the wild by selecting traits that were beneficial for our sort of short-term specific, short-term and human, many generations, short-term benefit.
Right.
It's like the banana. It's like the
bananas survive just fine on their own, though.
But yeah, you do see a lot of feral honeybee colonies popping up, so they're not quite banana level.
So that wouldn't that be an interesting place to then look for maybe what is a beneficial, if they're able to survive on their own in the wild, in the environment, and adapt to the environment, they may have some pretty good clues in their microbiome if they're differing from a domestically kept or husbanded. What is it? Cultivated hive.
Cultivated.
Yeah. I'm not sure if anyone has really compared feral colonies to managed colonies per se. There have been a lot of studies of all around the world of Apis mellifera, the species. And they do all pretty much have the same 8 species of core bacteria. But whether there's more going on within those bacteria, like I mentioned, antibiotic resistance genes popping up in places where, in the US, where beekeepers had been using, applying antibiotics. Those are kind of more subtle things that you don't get just by kind of surveying what species are there. You have to dig into the genomes of those species to know what's going on. So there may be more kind of interesting diversity that's hidden among all these different honeybee populations. Yeah.
And as you said, it's the social aspect of them too, kind of keeps the same population going throughout the generations.
Yeah.
So might not be might not be any different. Yeah.
Right.
We don't want to keep you up too late tonight. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. What is it? Just leave us with a teaser for whatever, like the current stuff that you're working on, the big question that you're asking right now.
Yeah. So I'm working on bee gut microbiomes, and I'm interested in whether their bacteria constrain bee ability to respond to climate change. So we mentioned these like costs and benefits, and one cost that we didn't talk about is that sometimes the bacteria can be more sensitive to environmental stressors than the animal. And so some bacteria are really heat sensitive. And so if you are an animal that relies on a bacterium that's heat sensitive, then you are now heat sensitive. So I'm kind of looking at whether that is playing out in bees in a nutshell.
Very interesting. We'll be keeping an eye on your work to see what comes out of it.
Great.
This has been really great. If people do want to keep up with you and what you're doing, how can they do that? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so check out my website, tobinhammer.com. I'm on Twitter, Toby_hammer. Feel free to get in touch with me. I'd be happy to chat more about insects, microbiomes. Yeah.
Yeah, it just blew my mind with the last one. I hadn't even occurred to me at all the temperature sensitivity in the light of global warming as being an intense pressure.
Yeah.
That's wild. Okay.
Yeah, we probably don't have too much time, but I would.
No, we have time. I just don't want to keep you up too late. So if you would like to.
Well, I'll just say, just to expand on that a little bit. So there's this cool paper that came out about the stink bug, which is this particular stink bug called the southern green stink bug. It, like a lot of these other insects we talked about, is one of those that's critically reliant on bacterial symbiont. And it turns out that the bacterial symbiont is much more sensitive to heat than the bug itself is. And so what these researchers in Japan did was they reared the insects at a projected climate change scenario, like just a couple degrees Celsius elevated. And what happens is that kills the symbiont, and then the insect is no longer getting those nutritional benefits and needs from the bacterium, and then it dies. So it's not that the stink bug is heat sensitive, but it's reliant on these heat sensitive bacteria. And so that might be a really common phenomenon, and it might constrain the abilities of insects to adapt. So, this kind of, it's kind of unclear, with global warming, how able will organisms be to evolve higher temperature tolerance? How quickly are they able to do that to track warming? They may be more able to do that if they don't rely on symbionts. If they're like a caterpillar or one of these other organisms where it just has itself to worry about, as opposed to worrying about this partner that it relies on that may have a very different physiology and maybe way more heat sensitive or cold sensitive, etc. So that's kind of this interesting cost in an evolutionary way.
Everybody was laughing at the caterpillar for never having taken on a microbe.
Right.
Who's laughing now, baby? Right?
I mean,
but now I'm thinking, I'm like, how can we put some of these heat sensitive microbes into mosquitoes, into ticks, into all of the bugs that are spreading the disease spreading ones that we don't want to see.
And there's this hidden time bomb because we don't know how much of the food chain could disappear over a few degrees. I mean, that becomes a very concerning element.
Especially with the insect apocalypse getting a lot of attention, which it's not really an apocalypse per se, but there are a lot of very concerning declines going on, and so it is it will be a very important element to look at how microbes play into which insects and their declines, and whether we can tweak those microbes to sustain them under different kinds of stressors, chemical stressors, heat stresses, etc. Because that is a nice aspect of these microbiomes that isn't the case with insect genes, is that we can manipulate them more easily, like with probiotics or with prebiotics, where we can kind of fine tune the microbiome in kind of desired ways. So that's kind of a nice aspect, is that they're we can tinker with them a little bit more easily than with attributes that are encoded in the insect's own genome. So,
yeah. And thanks to horizontal gene transfer between bacteria, the same mechanism that leads to the antibiotic resistance, you can potentially get these various tinkered with genes to spread very easily, right?
Right. So potential concerns, but could be used to our advantage, I suppose. Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's very interesting. Yeah. Thank you so much. This is
it was really
cool
great
stuff.
Great being on the program, chatting with you all. But yeah, so anyone feel free to get in touch if you have any questions or want to chat more.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. This has just been really great. Got a chance to blow Justin's mind a little bit.
Yeah, I'm terrified now. About something I was never even on the horizon before.
Great.
All right, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Tobin. Everyone, Dr. Tobin Hammer from U of Texas at Austin.
See y'all later.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
And everyone else, we are going to take a quick break. We'll be coming round the break when we do. That's right. We'll be back in just a few moments with more This Week in Science. Stay tuned.
Can't explain things you've heard with more than intuition.
Hello. Thank you so much for supporting us by being here with us, joining us for another episode of This Week in Science. If you want to get Christmas presents for your friends that are TWIS related, oh, that's right. Right now, you should head over to the TWIS website. TWIS.org is where you can find a link to buy the 2020 calendar. That's right. This Week in Science has a calendar for 2020. Blair has made wonderful stained glass themed art with new animals for you to peruse each month. Wow. She's also putting on a costume right now. Wow. I don't know what's going on over there. Skeleton earrings and a big helmet. Okay. I think she's in Star Wars. Do you have a TIE fighter? I don't know if you have a TIE fighter.
No, that's the wrong side. I'm flying an X-Wing.
Oh, you're flying an X-Wing. Okay, thanks. Sorry. I don't know which side you're on, Blair.
Empire or something. Get out of here.
I don't know which side you're on. TWIS.org. Click on the frog link. It's not a hypnotoad. It is a horned frog. That's right. TWIS 2020. Click on the link. It'll take you to a PayPal interface where you can buy a calendar. Get them now. We're going to be ordering them soon. And I look forward to sending you yours before the holidays. I really do look forward to that. There's also our Zazzle store. If you haven't been to the Zazzle store before, the Zazzle store is full of all sorts of wonderful TWIS goodies. Shirts, tote bags, pillows, hats, all sorts of wonderful things. Peruse it, find some TWIS goodies, support TWIS while you do your shopping for the holidays. It would be really fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. And finally, also Patreon at our TWIS website. The Patreon link is where you can support us in an ongoing fashion, donating once a month at a level of your choosing. Choose your level of support. $10 and more a month will allow you to be thanked on the show every week. And finally, one more go round for, hey, Team Trees. Head over to teamtrees.org if you would like to be involved in planting trees. 20 million trees is the goal. And right now it's at 10,216,777. $1 per tree for the Arbor Foundation. It's gonna be great. I think it's time for us to go back into our show. That's enough messaging. I do believe I've told you enough. Thank you so much for your support. We really could not do any of this without you.
We can't explain things you've heard with more than intuition.
And we're back. You're listening to This Week in Science.
Yeah, we're back again with our science. We have so much. We do.
That is an awesome costume.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so jealous.
Had to do a little twist-a-ween here.
I figured I'd put on a costume after because all we have are scary masks around here this year.
Yeah, for those listening, Blair is in a red team helmet from Star Wars.
Yeah,
Ready,
I'm Red
TIE
5.
Fighter. ready to go take down the Death Star, no doubt.
Yeah.
Go Red 5. That's a 5. But right now, it is time for This Week in What Has Science Done For Me Lately? Well, this letter this week starts, "Hi, Dr. Kiki Blair and even Justin."
Thank you.
Darn.
Well, I think this is a good start.
That's a great start.
You have my
Here.
attention, dear listener.
That's a burn. Need some sap for that burn, Justin.
Woo! Here's what science has done for me lately. I'm of the vintage where there was no MMR vaccine when I was a child, and like most of my age group, I had at least 2 or 3 of those now uncommon thanks to vaccine illnesses. I had the measles when I was very young, and I had an extremely high fever while my adult teeth were forming. And due to this, I have very fragile teeth. When I was 13 or 14, both of my front lower teeth were broken, and I had to have them crowned.
Oh, no. That is
Back
rough for
then,
a kid.
Yeah, late 70s, early 80s. Having teeth crowned was a 6 to 8 week process of grinding teeth, taking molds, sending off molds, waiting for someone to hand cast and shape the crown, then having it installed over several visits to the dentist. Fast forward to earlier this year when I cracked a tooth and I had to have a root canal and another crown. This time, the tooth was scanned by the dentist with a hand scanner to model the existing tooth and how it fit with the rest of my teeth. The tooth was ground to shape, another scan was taken, and within 30 minutes, a new crown was computer cast and shaped in the dentist's office and installed in the same visit. No waiting 6 to 8 weeks with a temporary crown that prevented me from eating many foods, else it might come off. No repeat visits to the dentist. One crown 10 years ago took 4 visits because it wasn't made correctly when it was sent out. Thanks to scientific advances in 3D scanning, modeling, I was able to have a broken tooth fixed in just one short visit. Thank you, science. From Jim.
I can't wait to lose my next tooth now. It's like, that's really encouraging. That sounds like an awesome experience.
Yeah, it'll still hurt.
It will.
I don't think they've taken the pain out of dentistry yet.
They have not taken all the pain out, but it is definitely getting friendlier and better. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Definitely better.
Absolutely. And so, yes, I hope more people are less afraid of these routines at the dentist. I hope. You know.
Although to be fair, on that crown I did something happen. I must have gotten poked in the cheek. I got an infection. My face swelled up like a balloon, and I had like 104 fever. So,
oh no,
it was pretty convenient process. Other than that,
no.
What?
But he's alive today because of modern medicine. So that's
right.
I had antibiotics that worked.
Thank goodness.
Those were the days.
Oh my God. Remember, we need you to write in with your story of what science has done for you lately. I want to read your story on the show. Please write in. Send me an email, Kirsten, KIRSTEN, at thisweekinscience.com. Or leave us a message on our Facebook page. I need your letters. Send them in. It can even be a short one. It could be a sonnet. It could be all sorts of things. Send them in. Okay. Before Justin goes to sleep, we should get some stories in here. Yeah? Yeah. So let's jump in with my first terrifying story of the night. It's terrifying. Off in a galaxy far, far away. Oh, no, it wasn't a galaxy. It was a computer server, and it was taken over by an AI, an artificially intelligent algorithm.
Is this the one that writes screenplays or what?
No. This one beats everybody at StarCraft 2.
Okay.
If you know StarCraft 2 is it's a battle game. There are 3 groups of beings, the Proteans, the Terrans, and probably I'm forgetting the other one. But anyway, there's 3 groups of beings, and you can play as any one of them against the other 2 groups. And it's a strategy game, and you have resources that you need to manage to be able to. Oh, the Zerg. Thank you, Schnago. The Zerg. Yes, but you have resources, and you have to build things, and take over land, and you have to battle against the other forces. You have to grow your forces. There's all sorts of things that come into account. And apparently it's so complicated that there's some 10 to the 24 or 10 to the 26 possible moves at any one decision point in the game. Every time it's your turn, there's 10 to the 24 possibilities. And so DeepMind, the Google-based company that made the artificial intelligence that bested the best Go players and chess players in the world, has created a new artificial intelligence that is named AlphaStar. AlphaStar is self-trained, and
so this was the thing I was going to ask. But this is okay.
AlphaStar
so they set out goals for it, achievement markers to do this. This was a good result.
Yes.
Repeat, but it had to go through the motions.
And initially, it just played the game by itself, playing against itself. So it started getting better and better, and eventually they let it out onto a real StarCraft 2 game server, and they invited players, and this was a server in Europe somewhere, and they invited StarCraft 2 players to play against the AI and try and beat it. And initially, when they did this, AlphaStar beat everybody because they didn't limit its game speed. And so the decisions it was making and the speed at which it could make moves was faster than any human could possibly.
Yeah. So that was another question I had. It's like, isn't it one of those things like if you're clicking faster, remember to update all your clickety clacks over here. You got a thing building. You got to click that thing, and which is why I can't play those games. They just cause anxiety.
Yeah, so the question was, if you're just clicking faster, then are you just winning because you're clicking faster, or are you winning because you're better and making better strategy decisions? So they handicapped the AI and made it more human speed, and then they put it back out again, and it didn't win all the games, but it did end up becoming grandmaster status. It beat 99.8% of the people that it competed against, but it didn't beat everybody. There were still some humans who did better. And so Google is saying, we did it. We beat StarCraft 2, but there are some other researchers that have come out and said, well, you didn't beat everybody. And do you really know that you made all the right, this AI made all the really strategic moves? Are there no more weaknesses to the AI strategy? And so they're saying that maybe it's not quite to the level of the AlphaGo AI that beat the Go game, that maybe there are still some improvements that need to be made. But for all intents and purposes, strategy games are falling to AI.
And so the point of this is to build robots that can handle strategy, right? That's the overarching, not just hey, we want to mess with video games. This is the actual goal of this, right? Is to develop strategy systems in AI.
Yeah. So do you remember last week we talked with Melanie Mitchell, and she talked about brittleness in AI and AI not being able to transfer their abilities from one instance to something different. And that is what they're aiming for by increasing the strategic complexity of the situations that they're putting the AIs in, DeepMind thinks that they will get closer and closer to creating a more generalized intelligence. And that's the goal. So making a more agile intelligence.
And so the next level of this would be because in that self-learning mode, first of all, you have to have a complex set of moves available. There was a movie once. What was it? Shall we play a game?
Yes, War Games.
War Games. Thank you.
With Matthew Broderick.
Matthew Broderick took down the supercomputer by making it play tic-tac-toe against itself.
Yeah.
And it kept getting like, there's no way of winning this game. And it eventually destroyed the computer, had a meltdown.
Because playing against itself, it was just playing against itself and all the decisions it was making.
Couldn't win. It was showing that there was a lose-lose situation. So in the thing I'm trying to picture is in the version of it where it's playing itself. I could see taking very narrow bandwidths of strategy back and forth. I don't know the game, but if it was like if I just build enough mining craft and crash them into the other team, eventually, after a million moves of this, once I can win. But so then if you need two of these AIs coming up with competitive strategies that then go against each other. So it would have to be siloed, like two brain, like playing a mirror of itself, right?
And so what they ended up doing is it's not specifically self-play for this exact, like, it's not just playing itself and learning from itself and only like, I can't beat myself. What they did is they created these siloed instances that are like different versions of itself, but that were programmed to be exploiters and to find weaknesses. And so there's the one main alpha star that was looking for particular strategies and would go towards particular strategies, but then the exploiters would come in, and that would, instead of the alpha star becoming very narrow in its ability, it would end up having to I guess be more robust in its ability to defend against certain attacks. And so that was the idea.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And then so when we're talking about transferring this ability, I still don't see where this becomes a real world thing when we're talking about applying it to biology in a sense, where there needs to be this physical world interaction that has its own physical realities. I still don't see. I'm just being limited in my vision, maybe. But what I do see is probably the quickest, highest, best use of this would be in hacking. Would be applied to cybersecurity or a cyber offensive technology, because it's programming versus programming. It's probing for weaknesses in other programming, so that would probably be the thing that would be the easiest for me to imagine it being applied to in our real world. Would be still locked into a digital space.
I don't know. I'm sure this kind of AI, it's going to be applied to the economy. It's going to be applied to scientific pursuits. It'll be applied. There are probably very many ways that these kinds of things will be applied in the future. For now, games, chess, Go, StarCraft 2. That's where we're at. Moving on, in other really interesting news, let's talk about brains, because it's on Halloween. And
brains.
And one day, we all may be mind-controlled zombies.
Aren't we already with our cell phones?
Yeah. But imagine if instead of having to pick up your cell phone to talk to somebody, they could just communicate right into your brain, or even, get you to do things just from their brain to your brain. What if all of our brains could be connected, where instead of having our little fingers tippity-toppeting on the keyboards and having to look into a camera and look at a screen to talk to each other, what if we just existed connected to each other's brains?
Oh no, everyone would know what I was thinking all the time.
That's
not
terrifying. It's terrifying, isn't it?
Your search engine already does.
I mean, I don't type everything into the search engine.
Not everything. Well, researchers just published a new study in Scientific Reports in which they report the first time ever that multiple brains have been connected directly, brain to brain interfaces. They without invasiveness, so no implants necessary. They used external EEGs where they picked up brain activity from the outside of the brain and took those brain signals, and they were translated into a computer. The computer then translated the signal, sent it to another person, where it was then translated into a transcranial magnetic stimulation pulse that would turn on a phosphine, which is in essence a burst of light. It gets one of the cells in your retina to burst with light, so it leaves a little visual signal. And by doing this signal, then the receiver of information would then think about what that meant and solve a puzzle in a particular way based on the answers that they had gotten. So they played a Tetris-like game, and the senders were looking at the game. The receivers were looking at the same game, but at the bottom of the screen in the game of Tetris, where you have like the hole that's there and you got to figure it out, the receivers could not see what the little puzzle piece was falling down to fill. And so it was the sender's job to send the signal of whether or not the puzzle piece that was falling from the top of the screen needed to be flipped over or not. And so the phosphine signal was signaling either a burst of light that meant, yes, flip it, or there was no burst of light, no phosphine, and the receiver should then not flip the puzzle piece. Anyway, it worked. They were able to, the receivers received over 85% accuracy. The signals were transmitted from brain to brain, and from not just brain, but brain to computer with all of this EEG and transmagnetic stimulation. It's still just a very simple signal. It's a yes or no pulse. It's binary. So if you wanted to send any more complicated information, it would take a very long time. It would be a lot more difficult. But it is the proof of concept, they say, to this idea that one day we may be able to connect brain to brain to communicate.
And if it was the real true brain to brain connection for Tetris, you would also be communicating the stress of when you accidentally rotate it the wrong way before it hits, and then you've covered up the hole, and now they're coming faster, and
and the other thing then too is based on the story you just did, if you have an algorithm that can play the game, you can have it sending a signal. You don't actually need the first brain is actually not necessary. Or you could essentially have that communication take place over time. So here's an interesting thing. Then it would be one way, of course, but I'm thinking you could record something with your brain that you could give to a great grandchild to receive. But on the other hand, you could write a letter. You can make a video.
I was thinking more that, like, you know how athletes could be caught juicing. Gamers could be caught using a brain to machine connection to AI to play the game for them.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
Although
just a little pair of Google goggles or something like this, tie it into the AI, and
the AI,
and then if you get it to
accentuate your choices.
And we had the one where you could make you'd send the electrical signal, or where a finger makes somebody else's finger move at a different university. Then even your clicking can be taken over by a computer. that's making you're just along for the ride at that point. You're just getting credit for computers.
You're being told what to do by the computer and doing what the computer tells you.
Which we already do with other humans, though. Other humans get us clicking things and have us doing work and job stuff. And
one aspect to this study, which I thought was, I'm questioning the need for them to do it, was the last step in which they took the response of the receiving person, and after receiving the transcranial magnetic stimulation, that person needed to tell the game whether to flip it over or not. And instead of having them reach out and hit a button to do that, again, they recorded an EEG to turn it into a computer signal. So the brain told the computer what to do. I really don't see the need for that, aside from, potentially being able to communicate back and forth with people who are locked in, or potentially with people who have uploaded their consciousness to computers. Why turn it into a fully digital signal as opposed to have the person just reach out and hit a button?
So I would assume it's because they don't want cheating, because it's just like when you have the hearing test at school and you don't hear anything,
know what
but
the
you're
brain
like,
is doing.
It's been a while. There's probably a sound. I'm going to raise my hand anyway. I think
that's true.
I think if you're watching it and you're like, I just put that over there, I think this has to go over here, you might make a decision whether you felt anything or not.
Maybe. The way it sounded to me is that it actually hurts the experiment, because then my first thought was that you just used the brain as a circuit.
Yes, the brain
as a conduit for the signal.
Yeah. So the other aspect of the study that I think, again, is interesting is this idea. It comes from some animal studies in which other researchers have networked rat brains and monkey brains. And in the case of the networked rat brains, the animals ended up solving a problem more efficiently together than they did on their own. So it was basically more brains were smarter together. And I kind of go, well, isn't that already what happens when we have people working together in groups?
Yes.
Isn't that what happens when people actually do stuff together on the internet? Some cool stuff happens. I mean, there's a lot of dumb stuff on the internet, but
there's a carrying capacity, right? Like we've talked about that on the show, that there's a group of people where you get smarter and you get smarter and you get smarter, and eventually there's too many, and then you actually you make worse and worse decisions the more people are involved.
But then there's also the prediction markets, where they are using the betting of lots of people betting to actually predict the outcomes of various things, and they're very accurate a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. So it's a question of whether it's a bunch of people making their own decisions and you average those decisions, or you ask a bunch of people in one place to make a shared decision. And I think that's what's really different, is that, if you're just crowdsourcing answers, it does get better with numbers. But if you have any cooperative stuff going on, it has a drop off.
Yeah, I just wonder if it has to be brain to brain to computer, or I'm like, why? Sorry, Justin.
You cut the human out of it completely, and also I think those studies on consensus decision making, it just all depends on the expertise of the people who are involved. So it's if you have a bunch of the world's leading fill in the blank researchers, people who have studied a thing. History, physics doesn't quite matter, and you have them give you predictive models of the outcome of sports ball events. You've taken them outside of their expertise.
No, but that's the thing about these prediction markets, is it doesn't matter if they're experts or not. It's just the wisdom of the crowd. Mm-hmm. And it's people all sorts of people voting together somehow create this very accurate estimate. And it's
the financial market predictions are no better than a coin flip.
Yeah, right.
When taken on whole,
they predict all sorts of things. You should look into everything. It. You would be fascinated.
Depends on who you're listening to in the financial markets. They predict everything, and the end result has been pretty much a coin flip.
Yeah. But anyway, this brain to brain, scary for Twissoween. Tell you, Justin, what do you have? Tell me a story.
Okay. If you are a human. Or as we've talked, maybe an insect too. Most insects. Some insects. We've still got to figure it out. You have bacteria. Some good, some bad, some utterly indifferent to your health. And you have them lots of places. They're under here, they're under there, they're all over your body. But for the most part, they go unnoticed. However, if you yourself were a bacteria, you would really notice the other bacteria because they would be everywhere. Other bacteria are constantly invading your space. The micro world is full, every niche. And so there's competition amongst bacteria just to survive. And a new study is now suggesting that gut microbiota, gut bacteria, acquire a sort of unique defensive arsenal against a type of a toxic assault that would come about by their neighboring microbes. What's really interesting to me about this is it's so this is a quotey voice of the project scientists. Diet and immune response are not enough to explain the constituents of their gut microbiome. The victors of struggles and hostilities among microorganisms attempting to reside in the gut may contribute to the makeup of that microbial community. So basically what this is going into is that the microbes in your gut are themselves coming up with antibiotics against their neighbors, or at least resistances to the attacks from their neighbors that were normally designed to destroy other bacteria. This becomes then an immunity factor in the body for invasive species, where if you look at a microbial community, even though they're very diverse and you find all sorts of microbes everywhere, they like to sort of hang out in communities just amongst themselves as much as possible. In the gut, that's not possible. You have to coexist. It's a big city. So the findings suggest that these immunity genes that they found, and this is B. fragilis, and other samples, they found these immunity genes appeared at substantially higher abundance than in that particular species. So, based on observation, scientists think that immunity genes have an adaptive role because they help bacteria overcome toxic hits from other assailants. This sort of shielding effect during growth in a petri dish in their labs, and when they introduced the bacteria carrying these genes into the guts of mice, followed. So we have our own immune system that we've kind of known about, antibodies and the like. The bacteria in our guts have their own defenses against the rest of their community. And somewhere in there is this balance that allows our microbiota to persist and to continue to exist.
I just got a vision of it, an image in my head of these. It's like a Russian nesting doll of, of immune systems and defenses. Here's my box of tricks. Well, I've got a box of tricks inside your box of tricks.
Yeah, and but one of the sort of interesting things though is we talk about antibiotic resistance quite a bit, and because this is from the way they're being applied on a macro scale, we're going to see some pretty disastrous effects of this. Our own gut microbes are in a constant state of defending themselves and adapting to and creating antibiotic resistance from other biotics.
Yeah.
Right. So this is part of why we don't easily obtain diseases from food. This is sort of an interesting thing from the conversation we had, that a lot of the microbiome that we have is not from anything that we're eating. They're from social interactions within families. This is kind of an interesting thing that is more recent revelation, when we have had twin studies that showed there wasn't genetic causes to things, but also that those twin studies within families found that having dissimilar diets also didn't affect the microbiome that much. It's just the hugs and kisses and sleeping in the same beds, or being on the same couch all day. It has that social effect of spreading the microbiome. But our microbiome becoming and maintaining its own antibiotic resistance to the rest of its biota is creating this sort of happy medium. But still warfare, still adaptation is taking place.
Yeah, and it's constantly developing. It's that constant movement of this. I mean, one adaptation means the other species is going to have an adaptation, that things are going to change constantly. And and then as that's changing, our own body is potentially adapting to how it reacts. Potentially.
And but then you also sort of think about this in terms of our how we share our microbes, and you can actually see how there can be very big differences within families, because it's the evolution that's going on in the defenses, and why one family has this horrible allergy. Like, everybody in this family has an allergy, or is more prone to getting a gastrointestinal ailment, whereas other families don't, because they're not those groups are not interacting. So in a way, we are also having silos of this evolution within groups of humans all over the world. And the more friends we have, I suppose, the less siloed we are. But the more siloed you are, the less friends you have, the more fragile your microbiome may eventually become.
And Facebook friends don't count unless you meet up in person and lick common things.
Yeah, share a glass of water is all. You don't have to go much further.
Maybe just shake hands.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe
just lick your hand first, though.
Do that. Blair, I'm not coming anywhere near you next time I see you.
I mean, I promised to dry my hand before.
Oh, I'm sure she's plenty healthy. She's ridden Bart enough times.
Lick your hand. That's High five for bacterial warfare. Yeah.
Also, remember how clean I normally am and how grossed out I am by people who don't shower. So,
yeah, I'm taking that into account. For show. Faux show. Well, that was themed up according to our microbial interview earlier. But Blair said she has some scary stories. Are you ready for those? Okay, it's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
Oh my goodness. I have rat-eating monkeys. That's right. Yes.
There's a rat that eats monkeys?
No, there's monkeys that eat rats.
Oh.
This is in palm oil forests. So palm oil is the most widely consumed vegetable oil. I'm sure you've heard about it in the environmental movement lately, relating to orangutans and other animals that live in these same areas where they then will clear cut and plant palm oil trees. But there's a new friend in this conversation, and that is the pig-tailed macaque. Now, pig-tailed macaques are known to be mostly frugivores. That means they eat fruit, mostly. But it turns out they thought they just occasionally feast on small birds or lizards, but there's actually quite a lot more meat in their diet than they thought. So there was a study looking at pigtailed macaques and their impacts on palm oil, started in about 2013, and they found these guys eating rats. They uncovered cavities in oil palm trunks where rats seek shelter during the day, and then they just grab them out of these cavities. One group of pigtailed macaques can catch more than 3,000 rats in a year. That's a lot of rats. So they actually found that macaque visitors, when there's a palm oil plantation that has a good number of macaque visitors, they can actually reduce rat numbers by more than 75%, which is more effective than a lot of chemical pesticides trying to remove rodents from a space. So the original thought actually was that macaques had a negative impact on palm oil because they eat palm fruit. Macaques eat more than 12 tons of oil palm fruits per year. But when you look at the percentage of palm oil production, that's about 0.56%. So half a percentage is going to palm oil fruits. On the opposite side, the rats that they're eating cause losses of about 10% of production. So by eating rats, they're actually way outweighing the loss of the fruits that they eat. They think that having pigtailed macaques in Malaysia's oil palm plantations could reduce crop damage from 10% from rats to less than 3%, corresponding to a yield equal to crops grown over about 406,000 hectares, or since money is really what it's all about, that's around $650,000 US that would be gained from the reduction in rat populations. So I bring this up for a couple reasons. One, we thought these monkeys ate fruit. Turns out they're murderous rat killers, just cracking them open. So that's pretty impressive and not what was anticipated for sure. Kind of an underestimated primate here. But the other thing is that palm oil, as I mentioned, is kind of a controversial topic in environmental concerns, because a lot of people think you just got to cut all of the palm oil out because it's so unsustainable, because they have to use pesticides, because there's all this terrible stuff going on. But if there's an opportunity to use biological pesticide, in this case, just promoting the existence of these macaques, that could promote this native animal, help keep the ecosystem healthy. They could still harvest their palm oil and reduce pest populations. It's kind of a win-win-win. So it's a good reminder, I think, that not all palm oil is bad necessarily. That's why you should look for sustainably harvested palm oil on products if you're trying to be a careful consumer, especially, this is really good timing, around Halloween. If you go to, I think it's the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, but if you just Google sustainable palm oil, you'll be able to find all sorts of resources on what Halloween candies are from sustainable palm oil sources. And if you have a favorite candy that doesn't have that, there's instructions on their website on how to put pressure on those companies to make sure that those palm oil plantations are kind of better suited to the habitat that they're in. And so this rat eating macaque could be a new solution to that problem.
Which would be good for the macaques, but it's the thing is, anything that you make, if you make palm oil more efficient, you create a surplus of it. It lowers the price of it, and it requires the competitors to tear down more forest and grow more palm oil to stand it. It's how this works. If palm oil is less efficient, and it can be made less efficient than it is now, then the price will be higher. It will be less in demand, and we'll use less of it.
That's not how it works, unfortunately.
That is how it works.
If they can get paid more for it, that's actually beneficial to them. How it does work is if you can keep the space sustainable, then the crops don't have to be rotated out because you've depleted the space. And it's actually cheaper to the producers, and they'll make a better profit. So it's better if you can grow palm oil. This is one of the reasons they look at sustainable sources in a space where it's not the only thing. It's not monoculture, because in the long run, it actually benefits the farmers. So there's lots of layers here. And the way that supply and demand work with these sorts of things is tricky, because sometimes fetching a higher price can actually be better. So there's all sorts of weird stuff there. Because if you're a company that depends on palm oil, you will subsidize some of your other ingredients in order to get what you need. So there's a lot of really great resources out there. I suggest people go look at it, especially around Halloween. It's perfect timing for that. But in the meantime, just think about rat-eating monkeys. All right.
I'll still completely disagree with you on the economics of this.
Well, we can chat more about it.
Conversation about that later. Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to go from one creepy primate to another. This is about eye-eyes. Eye-eyes are the nocturnal lemur that it used to be considered a harbinger of death. It used to be believed that if an eye pointed its long, skinny middle finger at you, then you would die. Well, these animals, we've talked about them a few times on the show because they are so bizarre. They have these long, skinny middle fingers that they use to tap on trees to locate grubs. We learned in one of my very first shows, actually, I remember very specifically that there was a cool story about thermoregulation in those middle fingers, and that they had their own kind of temperature different from the general body temperature in their fingers. Yes. So they have that going on. They have constantly growing incisors, though they are not rodents. They have huge, large ears. They have these hands that are so ill-equipped to climb through the trees, even though they are tree-dwelling species, that they have to be very specific with how they walk and very deliberate. And one of the lead researchers on this project from North Carolina State University said, quote, "When you watch them move, it looks like a strange lemur walking on spiders," which is definitely true. Their fingers look kind of like weirdo tarantula legs. But this new study shows us that, in fact, eye-eyes have 6 fingers.
6 fingers?
Yes.
What?
They have small pseudo-thumbs complete with their very own fingerprints that they think help them grip objects and branches as they move through the trees, since all those other fingers are so ill-equipped. This is the first accessory digit ever found in a primate. So they're the first primate we've ever seen with 6 fingers on each hand. The way they found this was they looked at tendons that lead to the eye-eyes' unusual hands. They were just looking at the tendons, the way the hands work, and they noticed that there was one tendon that branched off towards a small structure on their wrist. They used traditional dissection digital imaging techniques on 6 eye-eyes. The researchers found that the structure in question has both bone and cartilage, and the musculature allows it to move in 3 directions, which is the way human thumbs move. So that means, quote, "The pseudo-thumb is definitely more than just a nub," end quote. In fact, they exert an amount of force equivalent to almost half of the eye-eyes' body weight. So that definitely helps them grip to the trees and support their weight as they walk through the trees. They looked at eye specimens for both sexes. They looked at a range of ages from juvenile to adult. They found the exact same structure on both left and right hands for every single specimen. So their guess is that they developed this pseudo thumb to compensate for their other thumbs that are so specialized for grabbing grubs that otherwise they would have just fallen out of the trees. So when I said they're the only primate that they found with this 6 sixth digit. There's extra digits. For example, we've talked about on giant pandas and red pandas. They have the kind of bamboo shucking thumb that's like down on the wrist, and that also helps them to grip if they're climbing. So there's also some reptiles that have extra digits, the extinct reptiles that swim, that help them to have bigger hands for swimming. So they're just like giant oars. So there's other examples of this throughout history. It's not the first time we've seen this super weird thing, but it's the very first time we've seen something as, I guess, advanced or whatever you want to call it as a primate.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, though, why couldn't they have had 2 more added and then they really would be walking on spiders?
I mean, time will tell. Time will tell.
Maybe they really do have 8 fingers that are little spider hands.
Or maybe give them 20,000 more years. Maybe they will. I don't know.
Yeah, but their math will be different. It'll be based on the decimal system.
Yeah,
That's right.
this is true. Yeah. So one of the last quotes I just want to say from this too is, it's amazing that it's been there the whole time, in the strangest of all primates, but no one has noticed it until now. And I think the key is that they are already the weirdest. And so it's been this cornucopia of weird adaptations for them to look at, that they're only now just getting to the pseudo thumb.
Right. They've seen all sorts of other strange things, and with the eyes and this. Yeah. I mean, you just got to document them all, get through the morphology, figure it all out. It is fascinating, though. Like, it is so very specialized. And, how many other animals are out there that have this kind of specialized morphology that allows for something that is very thumb-like, that is very, that can move around and allow a little bit more advanced manipulation of objects. I'd love to know. I mean, dactyly, the 6-toed cats, that's an oddity. It's not necessarily helpful, right? Extra digits happen, but.
So another important thing to remember with the eyes too is that they're from Madagascar. So they're the whole island biogeography comes into play. So they have not had big predators pressure on them for a very, 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 very long time, since before they were eyes. And so there's not this selective pressure to escape predators, which means other weirdo things happen on Madagascar. Without those selective pressures, other selective pressures become the most influential. But there's also not as much competition generally for things. So they might be the only thing in their niche that eats these little grubs, which means they can really go to town specializing on this one food source.
And if there had been predators, they'd be dead.
Right.
So there's that to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Lack of predators gives you some pretty interesting evolutionary oddities.
It does. Thanks for the Animal Corner, Blair.
Of course.
Yeah, it's time to get into some quicker stories for the end of the show. Let's round it all up with this story. Oh my goodness. Researchers who have been studying humor. They're studying humor. They have published a study, and it's a systematic meta-analysis, a review of multiple studies. They've done their work to figure out, really, is there a difference between the sense of humor of men and women? And, well, based on their study, they found that men, on average, are funnier than women. That's what they found. On average. That doesn't mean that individual men are necessarily funnier than individual women who are very funny.
According to who? Other men?
Exactly. And so there are many aspects of this meta review, even though they have tried to, dot their I's and cross their T's and look at studies in which they only looked at studies in which the sex of the person making a joke, making a funny, was unknown, so that the person who's deciding whether or not it was funny had no idea. who was funny. They looked statistically to see whether there was an effect of the sex of the person who was judging the funniness, whether there was an effect of location of the study, like whether there's a country or a social difference in some way. They tried all sorts of things and really couldn't figure it out. But it's not as though men are like a lot funnier. It's like only a little bit funnier.
My question is, what do we have to gain by the results of this study? So this just sounds like somebody's like, we got to prove it because these women are edging out our stand-up territory. We got to prove it.
Exactly. Of course, though, these people doing this study are not just looking at it to find out this basis of who's funnier, men or women. What they are looking at is the evolutionary psychology of humor. And so a lot of evolutionary sociology kind of studies, then they make up explanations for why things are a particular way. And so what they have determined, based on looking at other studies as well, in which other studies have found that not only this is the crazy result I'm shocked at these kinds of things, but basically that women like to date funnier men, and men like to date women who think they're funny.
I see.
Totally true.
Sexual selection.
Totally true.
Yes, and so they
Absolutely
are
true.
Making a sexual selection hypothesis that the evolutionary reason that men on average are funnier than women on average is that men have to compete to be funnier to get women's attention because women are the choosy sex and are going to be judging them based on their sense of humor.
But then you would have to assume that
choice
funniness is based in genetics.
No, not at all.
It's not genetics. What they're saying is it's intelligence.
It's
so
intelligence
it's an honest signal of intelligence.
Honest signal of intelligence and the really good humor is sort of socially oriented to the point where you're illustrating. I understand social context of things.
Right.
Yeah.
There's that as well. That said, I wonder still if there is a social bias to even the humor that is, I guess, displayed in these studies by the if whether it's men or women, is there some socialization culturally that, other than this evolutionary hypothesis of mate choice and selection, are there other pressures that maybe keep women from trying to be as funny or that push men to be funnier? I mean, cafeteria in elementary school is a pretty harsh place.
I would guess that evolutionary pressures of living with women have caused men to have a really good sense of humor.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just for survival.
Lauren Gifford in our Facebook chat room says, I wonder if cavemen used humor to attract cave women.
I think it's a compensator, right? Like that's always what I assumed, is that there's other measures that are sexually selected for as well. But if you don't have one of those, you can kind of compensate. They're right. Isn't that what they always say about funny guys? Is that, it's because they're not hot or what? I'm just saying that's the stereotype. I'm not saying that's actually accurate. But
It's
So
here's
an
the
interesting thing that is a stereotype, and that could be a compensator for another sexual signal.
Look, if you're an incredibly attractive person, I think you might be onto something here. You may not need as much personality. In fact, the less you say, maybe the better for your odds of being selected. You could actually be very attractive and say something that turns off the opposite sex.
It's true.
Yeah. So, but if you're not,
absolutely,
as an incredibly handsome man as I wish I had been born, you really do need to craft other things in order to even be in the game. Yeah,
all
I can
about
see
knowing,
that as being a social pressure.
all about knowing how to play the game. Yes. Oh my, oh my. I'd love to hear what people think about this study. I will leave a link to the study. It is available online. I'll leave a link to this study for people to let me know what you think about this humorous study. And my last story for the night is organoids. We talk about organoids all the time. We've been talking about the scariness of, oh my God, brain organoids. And what if they really are like brains in a dish and they become conscious? And what do we do? And oh my gosh, ethics. Well, research just coming out reported at the annual Society for Neuroscience meeting this last week, actually, and some other labs doing research as well, have found that these little brain organoids aren't like regular brains. The neurons and the balls of cells are really stressed out. They've got a lot of stress hormones. They're not happy, and they are not developing the same as normal brains. Brain organoids are not yet to be considered an issue, I think. Yeah. Justin, what you got?
Okay, so 4-legged robots. We've seen them running, doing backflips, getting knocked down and getting up again, getting bullied in the office. Oddly. But as cool and creepy as it all is, it's not what we really want to see. What we really want to see is 2-legged hominoid robots, and not the CP30 old man shuffling around bipedalism. What we want is the capability to rebuild a man better, stronger, faster. We want humanoid androids.
That's what you want, maybe. It's not what I want.
Maybe it's not what Blair wants. But it's what the rest of robot humanity want. This is kind of the goal, to make something that seems human-y, to replace us, to have a technological offspring. Because if you can't, it's a compensation thing. If it's very unlikely that you've been selected, you want to at least build an offspring. The drive is still there. Okay. So engineers at MIT and University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign have this in mind. Well, not the compensating for offspring thing. I don't know if that was their motivation. But they had the idea of coming up with a 2-legged robot. And we're working on methods to control balance in a 2-legged robot. And which is sort of the essential step in being able to have these humanoid robots carry out high-impact tasks in more challenging environments than they encounter in the lab, such as crime fighting or maybe even child rearing. The team's robot was basically the lower part. It was like a torso and legs. And it's not autonomous. It's controlled by a human operator who is wearing a vest and running, I think, on a treadmill of some sort. And the robot is sort of following along. So this isn't so much completely robot running around. This is more like almost like an avatar robot. Mm-hmm. So it's responding to the motions and the movements of the human. And they developed a vest for the human to wear that would signal the human when the robot was becoming off balance, so that the human could feel that the robot was leaning too much to this side or the other, because it would create pressure on one side or the other of the vest. And the human could compensate its movements that then the robot would have to follow with. So, and they got it to work, which is really sort of a fascinating avatar type experience situation here. And in the way that they go on the article, would allow a robot controlled by a human to go into a real world and do things like throw its weight against a door if it was going through a doorway, or like
fight a giant scary fire.
Yeah, or to fight an alien
going on right now. Just real world examples.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Fires.
Robot firefighters. That's a fantastic idea. Cutting the lines and making sure that there's enough fire break going on in really dangerous situations. But that's what the story was going to be. But based on the AI story you did earlier, Kiki, I think this is it. This is the learning system. This is strap people up in these vests and record it and teach the algorithm of the AI to control balance in the physical world. And this bridges that gap between what I was saying. The AI can only function digitally. It can never take place, do things in the real world, in the physical world, where there's all these other factors. This is where that training can take place, where you can have an AI learn to balance a physical robot in real space.
We're going to train them to do everything.
Yeah. So better robots on the way in the future, and bipedal ones that can. The thing I want is, like anybody wants, is eventually they're going to outlaw football, American football.
Oh, right.
Eventually it's going to happen. They're either going to have to create rules that make it so safe that it's not interesting, or they're
robots. Run by robots. I'm just wondering why, and I'm sure there's a real answer to this. So if you have it, please let me know. Why would we want a bipedal robot besides our own hubris? Why? It seems like such a bad method. It's harder to balance. It's not as all-terrain. It's not as strong. It's just taller.
No, not necessarily even taller. Actually, I think this is a rather short robot.
Why? Why bipedal?
Well, okay, for one,
because then you can potentially use your hands to do things. If the robot has hands, I mean, you're not just on.
And the team did develop a robot previously
and 2
with
hands.
Yeah, but a robot previously did have a robot with hands that could.
Appendages.
So one possible reason is a stopgap before robots have completely taken over, where we're wanting them to operate in human environments, which we have designed largely around our sort of bipedalness. The ADA, American with Disabilities Act, has crafted enough space for most commercial areas for a bipedal or a wheeled robot to be able to navigate. So you're right, we don't necessarily need it. But part of integrating androids isn't about part of the technology of creating robots that are like androids that are simulated humans is that we also would likely have this desire to have robotics enhance humans who have maybe missing their limbs and want to be integrated in a way that isn't on wheels or isn't making them into a robot centaur.
Yeah. Okay. That one makes sense. Absolutely. Okay. No, I'm with you on that one. That's a very good reason.
Yeah. So, and when your brain is in a jar far into the future, Blair, and you have your sustainable encasement that will allow you to live forever, you may be okay with being a robot centaur. You may prefer it. You are a fan of animals.
I'll be a robotar. It'll be
You
great.
might be a robot panda, for all we know. It's just the irony of...
A panda pillar.
Robot. A panda pillar with just like 10 sets of legs.
Yeah. You can be anything and be happy with it. Some people will still be attached to that human form in some way. So. But anyway, I thought it was a really creative method of controlling. Puts the human through a lot of work in this scenario. Yeah. But if we combine it with the AI and turn it into a training and a learning system, this would be a really good method for teaching balance to robots.
Blair, finish out the show.
Just a couple of quick headlines. I saw this all over the internet over the past few days. Just thought it would be worth mentioning here if you haven't seen it. Rats were trained to drive tiny cars.
What?
Scientists successfully trained a group of rodents to drive tiny cars in exchange for Fruit Loops. They they wanted to see how well how well rats that were housed in more natural settings, enriched environments, performed against those kept in labs and kind of stark environments. They were robot cars with clear plastic food containers on the top with the driver compartment and an aluminum plate on the bottom. Copper wire was threaded horizontally with 3 bars left, center, and right. When they touched any of those, the car moved. So center went forward, left went left, right went right. So it actually sounds more complicated to me than how actual cars work.
Yeah.
And they learned it real well. They moved around this large area, an arena 150 centimeters by 60 centimeters, not huge, but it was big enough that they could drive these cars around. And what's really interesting is those kept in these stimuli-rich environments did better than the lab counterparts, way better. So those that had just experienced more stuff were better. And then they test stress, and they found that those who learned how to drive had less stress. So they think it's an indication of satisfaction of gaining mastery over a new skill. But if you were a passenger in a car and the other rat was driving, your stress level did not decrease.
No.
Brake,
That's just
Margaret.
humans.
Hit the brake, Margaret.
Don't you see the red light? Yes. Amazing. So rats driving cars. Very last thing I just want to tell you about spiders. We've talked about their copulatory organs, their pedipalps, that they're not exactly like other ones where there's a direct connection to the body cavity where sperm is stored. They kind of have to move it onto the copulatory organ. And then so for that reason, it's actually made out of similar gene locuses as claws and things like that. So they actually think for a long time, they assumed there was no nervous tissue in the pedipalp, but new studies looking at multiple types of spiders across huge swaths of different spider lineages show that it does look like, in fact, they have feeling in their pedipalps. And they were very excited in this study to talk about how this might help them scoop out other males' sperm to kind of reduce sperm competition. This could help them with the actual mating process and the mechanics of it all. But the only thing that I could think about is the fact that male spiders rip off or have these organs ripped off by females and then eaten. So they can feel that.
Ow.
That's
Hopefully
all I can think about the story. But nobody
Hopefully
brought
they're
this
into
up.
it.
Nobody brought
Hopefully.
it up. I want to get everyone on the phone. Excuse me. Hey, did you guys forget? They ripped those off. It's kind of important to the story.
Hopefully.
They didn't ask that question. They're like, "What? We're not going to think about that
Like,
one."
how cool they have feeling and not cool. Not cool at all.
Not cool.
I was reading being like, oh, actually, that's great news. There's no feeling in there because, that's not a
not
fun
something you
area for that. Oh no.
And I love that you're worrying about this for the spiders. Thank you for feeling for the
Just
spiders,
really,
Blair.
it's adding an extra level to the whole situation. And not even just, it was something I didn't even know I had that got taken away from me. Like, I didn't know that we didn't think they had nervous tissue in there. So I was just like, oh yeah, that's horrifying. And then, no, we thought they couldn't feel it, but it turns out they do. That's like saying, I bought you a cake, but I ate it all before I got here. What? Why didn't you just tell me?
No,
Blair. It's not at all.
It's much worse than that.
It's worse
it is
than
much worse than that. You do not have the right analogy.
Nope.
No. It's somebody offers to shake hands with you and
they
keeps your hand.
Oh, no. They keep your hand.
Yeah, nope. That's more like it. Hand of glory. That does it for this episode of This Week in Science. Thank you for listening. Blair and Justin, thank you for some great stories tonight. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I would love to shout out to people out there. Happy Twissoween! Big ol' shout out to Fada for helping with show notes and our chat room. Gord McLeod, thank you for helping in our twist.org/live chat room. Thank you to Identity 4 for recording the show so that we can have a wonderful podcast that we can release. And thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Paul Disney, Ed Dyer, Andrew Swanson, Craig Landon, Andy Groh, Ed Stu Pollock, Philip Shane, Ken Hayes, Harrison Prathers, Charlene Henry, Joshua Fury, Steve DeBell, Alex Wilson, Tony Steele, Richard Porter, Mark Bizarros, Jack, Matthew Litwin, Jason Roberts, Bill Kay, Bob Calder, Eric Knapp, Richard, Brian Condren, Dave Neighbor, Howard Tan, Gome K, Donald Mundis, Sarah Forfar, Dan K, Matt Bass, Darwin Hannon, Patrick Pecoraro, Ben Bignell, Gene Tellier, John Gridley, Corinne Benton, Adam LaJoy, Sarah Chavez, Rodney Lewis, Tiffany Boyd, John Bertram, Mountain Sloth, Seth O'Gradney, Stephen Alberon, John Ratnaswamy, Dave Friedel, Daryl Myshak, Paul Ronovich, Sue Doster, Dave Wilkinson, Noodles, Kevin Reardon, Christoph Zucknerek, Ashish Pants, Ulysses Adkins, Artyom, Rick Ramis, Paul, John McKee, Jason Olds, Brian Carrington, Christopher Dreyer, Lisa Suzuki, Jim Drapeau, Greg Riley, Sean Lamb, Steve Leisman, Kurt Larson, Rudy Garcia, Marjorie, Gary S., Robert, Greg Briggs, Brendan Minish, Christopher Rappin, Flying Out, Aaron Luthen, Matt Sutter, Mark Hessenflow, Kevin Barachan, Byron Lee E.O. Thank you for your support on Patreon. If you are interested in supporting us, you can find information at the Patreon link at our website or go directly to patreon.com/thisweekinscience. On next week's show, we will be joined by the Bug Chicks. That's right. The Bug Chicks, they're local to Portland, but they travel around the world. And they are entomologists and educators. And we're going to talk with them about bugs. Once again, we will be broadcasting live online, 8 p.m. Pacific time, twist.org/live. You can watch and join our chat room. Don't worry if you can't make it, though. You can find past episodes at our YouTube channel or twist.org.
Thank you for enjoying the show. TWIS is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science anywhere where podcasts are found. If you enjoy the show, remember to tell your friends about it. TWIS. If you didn't enjoy the show, you could still tell that they might still like it.
Truth. For more information on anything you've heard here today, like pictures of those rats driving cars, show notes will be available on our website. That's at www.twist.org, where you can also make comments and start conversations with the host and other listeners. Also, while you're there, please pre-order our 2020 TWIS Blair's Animal Corner calendar.
Absolutely. You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, somewhere in your subject line. Otherwise, what will happen to the email?
Oh, spam filtered into oblivion.
Oblivion! You can also hit us up on the Twitter where we are at TwistScience, at Dr. Kiki, at JacksonFly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. 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 And this week in science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This week in science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in 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 science.